I just got an order for a massive kite shield, which will be used for fighting, and therefore I won't use like the super authentic building methods and materials. So hello there, my name's Andrew from the Shieldery, and the Shieldery originally is a small business in which I mainly produce medieval shields for all kinds of purposes. But because this kite shield is so big, I have to create some special tools because it won't work in the way I usually handle that. For the tension we'll use a tension strap, but because if we don't have a shape we can bend the shield into, the force wouldn't get distributed evenly, and that's what we're gonna do now. For that I bought those 3 pieces of metal. In order to deform the metal I just lay it up and then gently press on it. I bought them way too thick. And I do this till I can see that the protection area is coming off. You can't use this technique on the edges though, therefore I'll need my jack. I also make sure that they arrived in the same degree. You know, it's not perfectly even, but I think it should do the trick. I'm a bit afraid that it could deform further while we put it under stress though, and that's why we'll place a wooden bar between the ends. This is just a scrap piece I had lying around, no worries. I think our 3 arcs look quite well, but before actually gluing the plywood plates together, I want to give them a short test fit whether everything works as intended. For the shield's wooden core, we'll use 3 plates of poplar plywood. 2 of them have been cut in the direction of the wood grain and 1 in a right angle to it. They all have a thickness of 4 millimeters. Now I'll evenly increase the pressure on each one, because if one side is completely stretched and the other one isn't stretched at all, no force is applied, I think it could break then, or the chances increase. No chance, I think that's it. As you can see, my working space is quite filled up by that piece. So now I want to check whether I can pick it up and just put it on the wall. That looks excellent, I just can put it in a corner like that. Now we know that the method works and we can combine our boards. In order to do that, I use just normal PVA glue and add a piece of fabric between each layer. That makes it way stronger and it won't break that easily. The fabric we'll use is quite light, and I'll show you more details to that later. To get a strong connection you have to massage the glue kind of into it. For that you'll also need water, because otherwise it just would get hard too fast. And the plane that has been cut in a right angle to the wood grain has to go in the middle in order to get a consistent strength. The shield's gonna be massive. I think I'll leave the plywood in this position for 7 days, maybe 10 days. Because till the glue in the center has dried, it will take some time. And in addition, the longer the plywood stays in this position, the less it will deform back. So that's actually quite a good thing, to be a bit patient. Which I'm normally not, but well, one has to learn, so let me just carry that into another room. While the shield dries, we can design our shape. I choose cardboard paper to cut it out of, because we need to transfer it not only to the wood, but also to fabric 3 times. Don't worry, I'll explain the reason behind that soon. First, let's take a closer look at the fabric. The first one is the same we used between our boards, and as you can see, it's quite open woven. This is important because then no air bubbles can form, and air would just escape pretty easy even after it's glued to the surface. That also applies to the second one, but it's much heavier. I think it weighs like 350 grams per square meter. I chose linen fabric for both because the fibers are much longer and therefore the fabric is much more resistant. Over 2 weeks have passed now. Let's remove the straps, then trace the shape and cut it out with a jigsaw. The problem we're gonna face now is the unevenness of the edge though. and it doesn't matter which blade you use, you'll always have that problem. In my case, I'll use the electric planer, which is just the fastest and best tool for that task. If you don't have one, you can use a normal file though. After that, the edges are still quite sharp, and because we want to fold some fabric around it, we need to deburr them. The file also could be used for that, but I'll use the orbital sander. The reason behind the first layer of fabric we're gonna apply now is to strengthen the shield's structure. And that's why it has to go around the shield as a whole. The fabric we're gonna use is the same as we use between the plywood planks. It doesn't have to be that thick. We are doing this, for example, for this case. Imagine you're down on the ground on the battlefield, you already have been hit. And then on the other side of the shield are like 150 kilogram, pound, I don't care, guy steps on. And because the ground isn't even and the shield is so broad, it could break. That's why we are doing this now. I nearly forgot to mention it. The structure of the fabric has to go parallel to the curvature of the shield, because otherwise, just look at that, if it's laying wrong, the shield would break before the fabric can deform. But in this way, in this way, it works. Because I wasn't sure at the scale how much the fabric would shrink in which direction, I didn't cut it precisely, but left like 20 centimeters extra at some points. I waited with the cut until I had attached the front side to be precise. I also cut off the excess of the 2 or 3 largest folds, because that wouldn't add strength, but just weight, and they would be a waste of glue. I used a bit of strength while bringing it over the edge to create extra tension. The first layer of fabric has dried now, and we need to face another problem, because on today's battle reenactments of the medieval age, like 80% of the hits from the blunt weaponry goes to the edge. That's why we need to reinforce it. Some people prefer rawhide for that, but I don't like the solution because first, it looks unauthentic, and second, if it gets a hit, it breaks pretty easily and, well, you can see it, and it becomes quite ugly because of that. That's why I'll use some rope. The rope we're gonna use is the standard false linen rope, which most of us use to tie our tents. It has the same diameter as the combined thickness of our plates. But now we have to face another problem, because how will we apply enough force to keep it in place until the glue we're going to use has dried? Therefore, we have 2 other solutions. The first one is a bit advanced, but I invented it myself and it's reusable. You need a bit of high quality duct tape. Come on. You rip it in the middle, put one aside, then you mark the middle, you fold it like that. Then you get your clamp, and now here you go. For the other solution you also need tape, but a bit more. You put it on one side. Then you'd apply the glue, and here you go. Of course, you can only use it once and have to throw the tape away after that. But if you just want to build one shield, don't bother with the clamps. While gluing on the rope, you should pay attention that it is precisely centered on the edge, because otherwise it would look weird and ugly. After circumnavigating the whole shield, it's time to marry the rope's ends. First I cut it with a bit of overcome, and then it's time for welding. Therefore we'll use a normal candle. Yeah, very careful, very careful. I used a piece of metal which I definitely should have bent in the correct way beforehand to press them together in a heat-resistant way. After like half a minute you can remove it by just pulling it to the side. On every other shield I normally build for fighting, I use this jute webbing in addition to enforce the edge. I thought about it quite long, but I won't do it here for 3 main reasons. The first one is, just imagine this is soaked like on a length of 3 meters in glue. Although it dries, it still stays quite heavy. And what use does the invincible shield have if you can't carry it? And the scale also comes into play on the second reason. Because of the size of the shield, all the strikes will be scattered over a larger area. And therefore we don't need to enforce it so strong. In contrary to a punching shield, where basically all the damage goes to 20 centimeters. The third reason is the size of the rope. Because it is way thicker than what I usually use. And that's why it can absorb the force much better too. Now we have taken care of basically any damage the shield could take, except of the most obvious one, of course, which are strikes to the surface. In order to make it more resistible to that, we'll add a second layer of fabric. It will be much heavier and will bind more glue also. But before we can do that, we need to remove those flippity flaps, which came into existence because of the folds of the first layer. The last layer of fabric has dried now, but some of the threads of the exposed edge of the back have transformed into pointy spikes. They are not dangerous though, but we cut them off because otherwise the paint on those parts would get scratched off instantly. The paint, by the way, is just normal acrylic, which from a chemical point of view is closely related to the PVA glue we used before. The reason why I already applied the paint of the back and the varnish is because otherwise I would have to paint around the straps, and this usually looks bad and it's a bit more difficult, and you've got blank spots beneath the straps directly which water could penetrate and so on, so that's the better method. Although we did what we could to keep it as light as possible, I'm afraid it would be very difficult to use it effectively for more than 5 or 10 minutes. That's why we have to attach an advanced handle, because if you change the position of your arm throughout, it becomes much more easy, and of course a shoulder strap. And if it looks a bit authentic, it wouldn't be bad either. That's why I will use the same setup as I did for the Shield of Arnold front Brians, or the reconstruction I did. Here's a beautiful picture. This is the printout for the back, which I will use to position the holes for the straps correctly. I'll show you how it's used later, but first let's finish this. After transferring the holes, I drew the shape of the leather patches to a piece of paper and also marked the position and size of the slots for the straps. Then I copied them to the leather and transferred the ends of the slots just by pressing them in with a nail. And because the leather was so thin, I could cut it out with scissors. Okay, I rethought the large leather thing, and I think it would be a bit too thin, because your hand will always rub on that, maybe even with chainmail or something like that. And I found this piece of leather, which is way thicker and also vegetable tanned. It fits nearly perfect. We lose on this side maybe 1 centimeter or something like that, but I think it should do it. Because the new leather was so thick, I had to use a box cutter knife though. In order to give the slots a nice ending, I used punch pliers, and for those who were too far away from the edge, I just used a normal punch. And of course I gave them a quick test fit. Because there were so many straps and I would have mixed them up otherwise, I had to give them numbers. I estimated their required length by putting them into place and marked the size I felt best with. Then we can apply them and assemble the straps. As rivets, we'll use those ordinary nails and just clean up those heads. Another good advice I can give you is to use extra leather washers out of the same materials as the straps for every shield you'll use for fighting, because that distributes the force more equally and lengthens their lifetime. Then we mark the required length of our rivets and use a bolt cutter. But because the rivet's new surface is usually so uneven, I have to use the normal washer, the metal ones, as a tool to get the leather washer in position again. Now we can finally start riveting, but I got to be careful on the correct order, especially on the large patch, because if I would mix it up, some of the slots would stay empty because, well, it's already riveted. Or on the other hand, I couldn't access the rivets correctly anymore. It would be very uncomfortable. The shield basically has the size of a dining table, and that's why I need a special setup in order to hammer the rivets correctly. In order to do that, I put a thick piece of metal beneath the rivets and one of scrap wood of equal thickness on the other supporting point to get the correct angle. Now we can finally start. Okay, now that we are done with the handle, I can show you what I meant before. The most obvious way to carry it is of course like this, but then there are other options. My favorite one is this. You can hold it much more easy, it goes all on the biceps, and I think your head is protected much better too. Of course, you could only hold it like this, a bit shorter. It's also a good possibility for more reach. And then what's also possible for the most reach is if you just grip it by the X in the middle, basically. You can't do that very long, but you can keep a good distance between you and your enemy. And of course, you also got the shoulder strap if you're done or you have to wait or something like that. We are at 7 kilograms, and for a shield of that size, I think that's pretty okay. Now we can continue by painting the front side, and to my luck, the motif the customer requested is quite easy. Beautiful valve. And here's the happy customer with a way better costume than mine. It is so massive. I hope you liked the video so far. Don't forget to share, like and subscribe. Thanks to my Patreons. Without them, this wouldn't have happened most probably. So if you want to join them, you can find a link in the description. You may be curious how to build a medieval shield only with authentic materials. And that's what I did in my last video. So see you there. Bye bye.